All right, it's August 17th, 2022, and this is episode 1, raw and real, of the Pennant podcast. I'm Alex, and I'm here with Peter.
Hi, this is Peter.
And we're just going to go right into Alberta sovereignty. So many of you are surely aware that the United Conservative Party of Alberta is having a leadership race, and of course you have some candidates left over from the old Wild Rose days, like Danielle Smith, who is back with a vengeance. You have Brian Jean, also back. People might remember that Michelle Rempel left the Patrick Brown campaign to pursue leadership opportunities in the UCP, but she decided against it because she felt like the climate of the party wasn't conducive. But really, Danielle Smith has been the one who's been attracting the most national headlines, particularly with her proposed Alberta Sovereignty Act, which would more or less, by my understanding, give Alberta a quasi-veto over certain federal national policy. What's your take on this?
I don't know. I literally just saw the article a few minutes ago. Yeah, forgive us for the shaky kind of
It's
thing.
all my fault. We don't have the infrastructure today. We're doing it, as I said, raw and real, live. I'll get on the selfie stick and tripod thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I saw the story a few minutes ago, literally, and I just thought, I think, to use Jason Kenney's words, it's nuts, but in a good way. You know what I mean? Like if it's.
Well, Kenney specifically said that he thought the lieutenant governor would essentially veto the bill, even if it did manage to pass in the provincial legislature.
Yeah. But I guess regardless of that, that's the kind of shit that you want to see from your politicians, taking charge. And with the whole Alberta sovereignty thing, it's man, this close shot is distracting.
I'm sorry. Let's get a wider shot without my hand in it.
But yeah, I think it's the red meat that the Alberta sovereignty movement within the UCP wanted, I guess. So it's smart politically, whether it's practical or not. You campaign in poetry, govern in prose kind of thing. I'm all for it, honestly. Anything that gives more power to the levels beneath the feds, that delegates powers down, why not,
Yeah, well, I mean, that is federalism in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
No, that is true. I honestly haven't had the time to read into Kenney's argument about why the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta specifically would declare the proposed legislation to be unconstitutional. I can kind of see why certainly Laurentian Canada would think of it as unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. But, people now openly talk about opening up the equalization formula. And the West still wants in. They had 9 years of Harper, but it wasn't enough. They didn't really get the reforms that I think changed the relationship fundamentally between the Western provinces and the rest of the country. And I guess they're taking matters into their own hands at the provincial level.
Yeah. So, you think it politically could play well? Well, yeah, what
politically, it'll play very well.
Constitutionally, would it start a constitutional crisis if the lieutenant governor... Can they even veto? I guess they could, but I don't think that's ever happened before, right? Except for, the King Byng affair, but that was something completely different,
Well, yeah, and, to those of you who may not be Canadian civic scholars, certainly we're not, at least not officially, but the Lieutenant Governor and Governor General, they are the liaison to the Queen, essentially, right? They stand in as the Crown's representation. Their job is seen as largely apolitical, so for them to weigh in on partisan political matters, even ones of immense kind of constitutional weight, such as something like this, is somewhat unprecedented and definitely discouraged, I would say, within the norms of Canadian politics and Canadian governance. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's impossible. And maybe by Kenney floating this trial balloon now, he's essentially creating a permission structure for a future Lieutenant Governor of Alberta to veto such a piece of legislation, should it ever be passed by the provincial legislature.
Yeah, I feel I don't know. I feel like it seems like a big game of chicken. Because, like, if she does get elected first, like, would she even want to do this? And if she did, would the lieutenant governor even want to? I guess it could open up a messy can of worms, but I guess it's better than the status quo. I don't know.
Well, you can certainly see why it would be popular as well in a province that I'd say where the prime minister and the federal government is the least popular of any province.
Yeah.
And that's probably true generally, but it's certainly true right now under the Trudeau Liberals. So yeah, it's hard to see it not being, as Peter says, red meat for the base. I think he's definitely right about that. If it did get struck down constitutionally, it's not really a loss for Danielle Smith politically because it's out of her hands at that point. She still fulfilled her campaign promise. It just didn't bear out in the end because of circumstances outside of her control. So the real risk here is if Danielle Smith wins the leadership race and then decides to drop this entirely, because then you're going to have people flocking back to, for instance, Brian Jean, and then in 3-4 years we're going to be in a very similar situation.
Yeah, that's the thing. So yeah, I guess she has to go through with it if she gets the opportunity. There's just so many unanswered questions. Like, does this apply to, like, if the feds want to change the criminal code because that's their jurisdiction, but they're like, you know what? Like, okay, I'm just going to do the whole hot potato. I'm not saying Danielle Smith would do this, but let's say, you know, the feds wanted to expand abortion laws beyond what they already are, even though Canada has no limits on it. But let's say hypothetically they said, you know what, after birth abortion is legal, like fully legal, right? And Danielle Smith is like, no, we're not going to do this. Then what happens, you know? Like, assuming the law is voted on.
I wish you hadn't picked a healthcare example, because that is one of the things that the province has more jurisdiction over.
Oh, true, yeah.
But I do get your general point.
Yeah, but it also kind of intersects with the criminal code thing, right?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. At what point can Alberta simply say, we're not going to enforce federal laws?
Yeah.
And
or even on, like, drugs or whatever. What if the feds want to legalize magic mushrooms or something?
Well, I mean,
Alberta's
the
like,
reverse
no.
is kind of happening in BC right now, right?
Yeah.
And BC doesn't have a Sovereignty Act.
Yeah.
And although the NDP is in power there, the BC NDP are probably actually more friendly with the federal Liberals than the BC Liberals are, because the BC Liberals are kind of a center-right, kind of almost like conservative coalition.
For sure.
So if you look at, in BC recently, they've decriminalized possession of small amounts of scheduled substances. I think it's under 2.5 grams or something. And the federal health minister, Carolyn Bennett, has kind of smiled on this and referred to it as part of a broader strategy by governments in Canada generally to kind of liberalize in that direction. So BC basically said, we're not going to enforce these laws. And the federal government said, yeah, that sounds great. Actually, maybe we should at least talk about doing this federally or getting other provinces interested in it. So from that perspective, I guess there's no reason why Alberta, for example, couldn't do the opposite. Or essentially the same thing, but just in the opposite direction of the particular issue. But it all comes down to how much power do the provinces actually have, and then how much power do we want them to have. And the whole balance of Canadian federalism has been a really complicated, like, dance from the very beginning, right? So
yeah, plus I think we're missing a glaring elephant in the room of this debate, which is Quebec.
Yeah,
They
well, of
basically
course.
have a de facto sovereignty act
Well, so
since the 80s or 90s at least, you know.
Yes.
So after realizing that, I'm like, fuck it. Yes, Alberta should 100% do this. Every province needs to do this, because Quebec is the only province that has anything remotely close to this. They get away with everything that's completely unconstitutional, you know what I mean, in terms of language laws, religious headgear, expression of religious freedom, you know, with the the sickness, how they responded to that.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
So
That's very true.
fuck it.
They
I am 100%.
they had curfews
Yes.
in Montreal.
The only
God's
province
sake.
to implement that. I think the only state in like the western, only jurisdiction in the fucking North America at least. I don't know.
They're
about
the only
Mexico.
jurisdiction in North America that I'm aware of that had explicit curfews. I
Yeah.
think in some places, in the bluest of blue areas in the United States and so on, I think you had tacit permission for the police to at least question why you were out after a
Yeah.
certain time, but it was never to the point where there was a curfew as if you were in, an actual war or something.
Yeah. So you know what? Fuck it. I am endorsing Daniel Smith right now.
Okay.
With the intention of hoping that on behalf of the people of Alberta, she passes some sort of sovereignty act. If Quebec could do it, then fuck it, Alberta. Have at it.
Well, I'll
take.
just say, for the sake of disclosure, we are both lifelong residents, more or less, of Ottawa, Ontario.
Yeah, so this doesn't affect
So
me in the
our
slightest.
I should say Peter's endorsement of Danielle Smith, although honestly I'm not too far behind him, I just don't feel comfortable necessarily, given I've been kind of not following the UCP leadership race as
Me
closely
neither.
as I should be.
This is the only thing I know about her platform, and that's all I need.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, she's good on a lot of other stuff too, and she's
Yeah.
really good in interviews. She's really good one-on-one.
Oh yeah, I've seen interviews.
Well,
with her.
she was a radio host
Yeah.
for years. I believe she
Yeah.
went back to that after politics as well, and of course
Yeah.
now she's back in politics. So she's been colleagues with a lot of kind of right of center journalists in Canada before, which is probably very helpful.
Yeah.
So she's kind of this outsider, mavericky freedom candidate, but is a serious person, a serious politician,
Yeah.
and has, pretty serious connections and decent credibility, I'd say. I'd say she's respected on a personal basis, even by people who might accuse her of being a wingnut in some ways politically.
Honestly, sometimes you need a wingnut to get the job done, I guess. you know?
Damn right.
So, do you want to transition into another woman who is respected somewhat in the, I guess not necessarily...
Not Jill Biden.
Well, no, not Jill
Okay.
Biden. I'm talking about Lisa LaFlamme.
Oh, yes, yes.
Slightly different field, but also connected. So basically, Lisa LaFlamme, a few days ago, she was ousted by CTV News. She was the chief anchor at CTV National News. So basically, I grew up watching her like every night, like at like fucking 11 o'clock. Lisa LaFlamme, the National, would come up, and I don't know, she just had a command of the desk. You know what I mean? I thought, at least personally, she was the most respected news anchor in the country. She had taken over from Lloyd Robertson, who was like 77 and had held the post for like over 30 years almost at that point. And when Lloyd Robertson left, they did a whole documentary of him. The whole show was basically dedicated to him. I watched it live, and they're like, yeah, this is the heir apparent. Lisa LaFlamme gave her blessing and she got to take it over. This time, shuffled her out the back door, you know what I mean, like a fucking bad hookup or something. She was fired.
She got ghosted by Bell Media.
Literally, she was fired in late June, and she had just put out a statement via Twitter that the National Post published, kind of talking about it because there was pretty much a gag order saying that she couldn't talk about it until now. I want to find some, because the Canadaland did an interesting piece about it where they talked to some sources inside CTV Bell Media. But basically, the official story that Bell Media gave was that this is about them moving in a different direction, changing viewership habits, which makes no sense because all their viewers are like over 65.
Yeah.
So if anything, they want to stick with what they know. So putting Omar Sajidina in there, who's like 39, Lisa LaFlamme was 58. He's competent, you know what I mean? Like, he's attractive, he's well-spoken, like, you know what I mean? Like, he's good. I have no issues with him personally, but it just doesn't sit right. And Bell Media has a history of this in the local news in Ottawa. I grew up with Max Keeping and Caroline Meehan, who are like the foundation of the local Ottawa CJOH CTV News anchor desk, for
I met
years.
Max Keeping once at an Ottawa Lynx game.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him before. And, it was them, too, basically, for my whole childhood. And then, Max retired, and he later died. And Caroline Meehan was there with, they brought in Graham Richardson to replace Max. And then, all of a sudden, she just gets the statement that, yeah, your contract is done. We're shuffling you out the back door. And they replace her with the younger, quote-unquote, more attractive Patricia Bull. And, I'm always been conflicted about that. Carol Ann, sorry to go on an Ottawa news tangent for people around the world watching this, but basically Carol Ann, she has a special place in my heart, but she's, she bounced back into a city council position, so she's doing fine. And Patricia and Graham, they are a good fit, age-wise. So, they have a good chemistry. Nothing against Patricia. She's a fine journalist, you know what I mean? Whatever. It's a good team. I've kind of settled into it. This seems a bit more blatant in the sense that she literally was the lead anchor, and there was only one of her. So you can't make the excuse that, we wanted to match ages,
And just to be clear, too, CTV is the biggest national news broadcast in the country.
Literally
it is more watched than CBC, which is the national publicly funded state broadcaster.
Or Global News.
So it's the number one in the private sector and overall. So to get rid of their...
She won multiple awards.
Yeah.
I think she won an award.
Well, she had gravitas.
Year.
As you were saying, she had that kind of Cronkite quality.
Literally the closest thing we'll ever get to Walter Cronkite in this country.
Yeah, especially, now that Mansbridge is gone.
Yeah, so... And basically, let me bring up the Canadaland report about the kind of infighting that kind of goes against the official narrative put out by Bell Media. And for people who are watching it outside Canada, for context, Bell Media is pretty much one of our big 3 telecoms, because we're so monopolistic in this country. There's only there's other smaller ones, but most of the market is controlled by Rogers, Bell, and Telus, and then they'll have smaller subsidiaries underneath them.
And they're constantly acquiring companies like Shaw and stuff like that.
And one of the companies Bell owns is CTV News, one of the biggest newscasters, or the biggest, honestly.
Yeah.
So basically, Canadaland is saying that essentially she was fired because she pushed back against a Bell executive. The Bell executives like to interfere in the coverage of the stories. Michael Melling is the vice president of news at Bell Media, and he's responsible for ousting LaFlamme according to multiple sources. And there's a quote here. Basically, I kind of like it because it's something that you hear a lot from the kind of girl boss kind of types, where they say, one of the sources quoted says, "He doesn't like it when women push back." You know what I mean? I have to say in that tone because usually that's how I imagine them talking about it. You know what I mean? But in this case, it kind of makes sense. Whether you want to take the feminist angle or the ageist angle, I think those are 2 valid angles. To me, reading this report, I feel like it's more of a power struggle, because you have the loyalists to Bell, you have the loyalists to Lisa LaFlamme, who are obviously coming out and talking, anonymous sources or whatnot, so it just seems like a corporate power struggle story that underscores the fact that the media is not the media charity, it's the media business.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to make an NBA analogy here.
Yeah.
So, Jerry Krause, the general manager of the Chicago Bulls in the Jordan Pippen era, and then in the Last Dance, the 6th championship season, Jerry Krause was like, okay, guys, time to rebuild, because I got to prove that I, Jerry Krause, am the general manager that creates winners, rather than I only won 6 championships because I had Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr, and Dennis Rodman. So,
So you do the unthinkable and blow up the team.
So, and, obviously there's financial stuff here at play. Peter, you showed me an article, a Robin Urbach piece in the Globe, where Urbach was essentially making the case that Bell has been laying off.
Oh, yeah, this isn't limited to the National News Desk.
They blew up TSN Vancouver.
Yeah, they've been cutting and slashing everywhere they could find the head to chop, basically.
So is it possible that Lisa LaFlamme was just the biggest name left on the list that could be a cost-cutting measure? Because, if you're if you're 80 something years old and you've been watching CTV News every day since,
Yeah.
the early Lloyd Robertson era,
Yeah.
are you going to stop now even if they replace Lisa LaFlamme? Like,
Yeah,
probably
like, I
not.
think most people won't, but it just underscores how much of a dying business it is. 'Cause
Yeah.
they don't respect stability and tradition anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. There's a sense of institutional continuity that you used to have with broadcast news
Yeah.
that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, now it's just all cost cutting. Let's get the youngest, hippest, most attractive people in there. Look at CNN. Like, there must be a whole casting couch going on there with Jeff Zucker or whoever in terms of why do all these newscasters look like actors and Playboy models?
Well,
Now,
I'd say
you know what I mean?
CNN is kind of a unique case because it
Yeah.
is basically entertainment.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
don't.
even if you look at CTV, the stuff here in Canada, it's like all these people are just literally Hollywood casting couch.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying that CTV is vastly better or anything, but
Yeah.
CNN has a lot more opinion stuff
Yeah.
than CTV does. So you have the Don Lemons and the Chris Cuomos and so on, and those are all kind of like Hollywoody type guys. Like, not in the
Yeah.
sense that they're Hollywood literally, but in the sense that they're people you would cast to be on CNN, and that's why they're on CNN, not
Yeah.
necessarily because they necessarily bring a new intellectual angle to the table.
Like, Cuomo had his roid rage moment.
Oh
at the
my
restaurant
God,
when
dude.
someone called him Fredo, and he's like, "Who you talking to? Who's a Fredo?" You
It's
know
the
what I mean?
N-word for Italians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's actually a Godfather reference, but okay.
Yeah. So that's a very Hollywood thing. Like, I think of like Alec Baldwin, when I think of like Cuomo kind of freaking out over that kind of shit. It's a very Alec Baldwin tier kind of move.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you could expect, for instance, Alec Baldwin to impersonate on Saturday Night Live. Chris
Yeah.
Cuomo melting down. And,
Yeah.
there was the... remember a couple months ago at my place, we went through the whole Chris Cuomo fake dumbbell controversy.
Oh,
and
my
there was that
goodness.
video where Rogan
Yes.
actually believed that Chris Cuomo just handed a guy a 100-pound dumbbell
You gotta
without
insert
even
that
like
video.
stabilizing his wrist or his elbow or anything like that. Yeah, okay.
Insert
I gotta
that
clip
video.
that in.
Yeah, because it's too good. Like,
Honestly, it was hot take.
Yes.
It was the darkest moment of Joe Rogan's career. Was believing that Chris Cuomo was using a real dumbbell.
darker than the N-word
Oh
take
my God.
compilation.
Well, you could be worse. It could be Cenk Uygur,
Yeah.
who has probably one of the
Oh yeah, the whole TO2
best or worst, depending on how you want to put it,
Yeah.
N-word compilations of all time.
Yeah. But anyways, we digress. So any last
We
thoughts
digress mightily.
on Lisa LaFlamme? Like,
Well, the other reason is that Lisa LaFlamme had apparently come to not really an editorial disagreement, maybe a financial disagreement, but she wanted more funding
oh yeah, I forgot about
for foreign
Ukraine.
correspondence
Yeah.
in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And she wanted more money for CTV coverage in that direction.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a personal conflict, as much as we're aware. I don't know, maybe she was asking for a raise personally or something, but we don't know that at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But she seemed to want to move them editorially in that direction. And Bell Media, whether it was an editorial decision by the bosses at Bell, or specifically a cost-cutting measure, we can't afford to send all these people to Ukraine and pay for security and blah, blah, blah. They decided against it, and then perhaps that led to the chain of events that led to Lisa LaFlamme's ouster. But I guess having now added that addendum, my question to you is, what direction do you think Lisa LaFlamme goes here?
She could really do anything. My mother was saying she could be a professor.
Oh yeah, you're
Journalism
right.
prof.
Journalism professor,
Honestly, if
absolutely.
Carleton was
U of
smart,
T,
U of
Ryerson.
T, yeah, anywhere. Like, she could go to the CBC.
Yeah.
Go anywhere,
Well, oh my God.
Start a podcast. Like, the thing is, it's actually a good question because it's like, I think the thing about Canadian media is that it's so monopolistic and incestuous that, like,
Yes.
anyone who's been kind of excommunicated, thrown out from it, they're
like blacklisted almost.
Yeah, you don't hear about, like, Wendy Mesley after the whole N-word thing.
We have
is
not
she?
heard a peep from Wendy Mesley.
Jian Gomeshi put out, like, a podcast after that whole thing.
Really?
The assault allegations and everything, and I haven't heard from him since. Peter Mansbridge has a podcast called The Bridge with Peter Mansbridge.
Wow, great name.
I've listened to a couple episodes, but it's not like it's making waves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all these people maybe you see this in America too. Actually, no, because in America, at the very least, I think American media personalities, maybe just based on how big the market is, they're a lot more, they're a lot better at making the transition from traditional media to new media and having
Yeah.
to having their audiences follow them and building an audience. Like Megyn Kelly, you know, after the whole Fox thing, and then she went to NBC and that show flopped. She has the Megyn Kelly show. I see her on my YouTube feed. It seems like it's doing well, you know. Fucking the only Canadian example I could think of is like Ezra Levant and like
Oh my God.
Sun News Network.
That's a
which
great
is basically
example, though.
a poor attempt at Canadian Fox News, but then he took that and turned that into Rebel News, which made international headlines for better or for worse, you know. But there's a whole movement and audience behind that. And that's the only one I could think of someone who started in traditional media and was known in traditional media. So like Jesse Brown from Canadaland.
Also
really
on the rebel side of the spectrum, although not as much in that meme shock jock direction.
Yeah.
You also have True North.
But were they known for? I'm
yeah,
saying
they were fairly prominent, right? It was like Canadian journalists and fairly prominent publication. I mean, I think they were largely working for like the Sun and stuff like that.
Okay, I guess I wasn't aware of that.
Well, no, fair enough. But again,
someone with a name like Lisa LaFlamme or Wendy Mesley.
Yeah,
or
she could have a prestige podcast where she interviewed the Celine Dion and whatever.
About it?
The big names that Canadians. Well,
but here's my hypothesis. My hypothesis is pretty much our names in Canadian media, are tied to the platform. The platform makes the name, not the other way around. Whereas in America, Joe Rogan could go from YouTube to Spotify, and he's still making headlines in TMZ wherever he goes.
So my comparison to Rogan for Canada would be Peterson. Peterson he didn't need the traditional, he bypassed the traditional media completely. Rex Murphy's kind of doing that now too, in the sense that Rex Murphy's emerged as kind of one of these intellectual dark webbers.
Yeah.
Although he still writes the column for the National Post.
Yeah.
But of course he used to host Cross Country Checkup on CBC.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of established journalists who then transition to online journalism. I know Paul Wells is doing a podcast right now.
So there's some potential, but like if you look at someone like Strombo, you know what I mean? And I don't know how popular the Strombo show was. It was on CBC, but like
it was popular. I mean, I don't know what the numbers were, but I knew a lot of people who watched it. I watched it from time to time. I was young.
He went to Hockey Night in Canada, which was his own debacle, and then after that
was weird to me. As much as I like Strombo,
Yeah.
I thought that was a weird move.
And now I think he's doing something completely different field.
In his position, though, I totally would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Man, even though I knew I would have no business being on Hockey Night in Canada, it would still, fulfill the childhood dream.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't hate on him at all for doing that.
I think he has some sort of music, like kind of underground music kind of podcast thing, so it's different. But he kind of faded into obscurity too. That's what I'm saying. It's like our media personalities, by far, if they were made in the traditional media, it's the platform making the name, and outside the platform there's no name. So as much as I like to say, I'm not saying Lisa LaFlamme's going to starve. I'm sure she's going to have an illustrious career. Honestly, I had this thought, and it just came back to mind. The one thing she could do to make a name for herself outside CTV, is either run for office. Yeah. Like Marcy Ian, her colleague,
or Seamus O'Regan,
or become Governor General. I think she's I told my mother that she is the
my God, Peter,
candidate for Governor General.
That is a really good idea, and I'm so glad that we're catching this live.
Yes.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Mark my words, Lisa LaFlamme will be Governor General. Maybe, if she wants it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It'd be a good coup for whichever prime minister would appoint her. She's fairly uncontroversial.
Yeah.
She's a reporter, you know what I mean? So she kind of has that nonpartisan kind of angle, sort of, I guess, even though she kind of toes the line, but as nonpartisan as you could get for a mainstream Canadian journalist.
Exactly, yeah.
And yeah, she's likable. So yeah.
She never hit anybody with her car, to which we're aware.
Yeah. I think we've had journalists be Governor Generals before too, so,
Have we?
Adrian Clarkson,
obviously, yeah. Right, yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's true.
So
For some reason, my mind jumped to Vincent Massey when you said that because he was such a patron of the CBC.
yeah,
But I don't think he was ever actually a working journalist, right? He was
No.
probably some fairly aristocratic dude. Anyway,
yeah.
but no, that's a really good point. It is a recent trend in Canadian history, certainly.
They were talking about appointing Peter Mansbridge as Governor General.
Well, wait, what was David Johnston doing?
He might have been, I don't know if he was a journal, he might have been some executive or something at some, either a news company or a think tank or some sort of like,
I feel like he was an executive somewhere,
Yeah.
maybe CTV or something.
maybe.
But he also became the head of the election debate committee, didn't he?
Yeah.
So that to me seems like someone who had a media role. I should really know all this stuff. This is
Yeah.
embarrassing. I'm
So-
really not representing myself well here with the Governor General knowledge.
Yeah, so I'm not too worried about her. It's just kind of sad and indicative of where we're at, but it's not really surprising. So was anything of value lost? Sort of, but I guess it doesn't really matter because.
Well, how seriously do you take the political angle here?
Of her running for politics?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
because, okay, like, as you said, we have good examples of CTV alums becoming Liberal ministers, right?
Yeah.
The whole Canada AM axis.
Yeah.
So if Lisa LaFlamme decided to run for the Liberal Party, say, and I don't know her personal politics, but I would not be surprised.
She'd have no issue getting elected in a downtown.
She'd win the downtown Toronto riding like that, just like
Yeah.
Freeland, right?
Yeah.
So I think she could be Freeland too, if she wanted to be, or Marcy Ian too, or
Yeah.
however you want to put it, right?
Yeah.
The question is, does she want that? I guess it's hypothetically possible she could drive
That's
for
the thing, I
another
don't know.
party, but I don't
Yeah.
know. Really though, if it would have been the best case scenario for her politically, assuming she has any political aspirations at all, would be if this stuff happened 2 or 3 years ago, and then she had time to run in an election or by-election as a Liberal, and then wait for the leadership race.
Yeah.
But
Honestly,
that window's over, so
Well,
she's gonna have to wait for the next leadership
it's
race.
kind of good because does she really want to jump on the Trudeau sinking ship?
Yeah, probably not, right?
Yeah. She could kind of get in when they kind of do the rebuild and start fresh,
Yeah.
you know. But I think judging from her personality, I feel like I almost think the Governor General thing would be most likely.
No, you're right. You're
Because
absolutely
she
right.
just seems
yeah.
like a traditional newswoman who's very like by the book, nonpartisan, at least exterior, you know.
Yeah.
So, like, it's possible, and she'd be good at it, but I'd be more surprised about that, you know.
Yeah, and you know, it's largely just that's what happens in Canada. If you're a journalist and you lose your job, you often run for office.
Yeah.
So I just feel like we have to address it,
Mhm.
even though I don't think it's necessarily likely in her case. But then again, I wouldn't have necessarily guessed it of O'Regan or Marcy Ian either.
That's
so,
true. Yeah.
Freeland was pretty obvious, though. Let's be real.
No, for sure. Yeah. Okay. What else do we have on the docket? We did Alberta sovereignty. Lisa LaFlamme. Do you want to talk about Ottawa February 22 fake news? Is that the travel
Honestly,
thing,
we
or
don't
no?
have to. We don't have to talk about that. We can save that for another time when we have better notes and fewer mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you want to talk about
What was the one before that? Oh, you know what? Actually, let's just quickly talk about Donald Trump and Ronald DeSantis. You good with
Yeah.
that?
Sure.
You want
I
to just
don't know
speak
if I have-
extemporaneously about this?
I don't know if I have much to say.
No, me
other
neither.
than,
It'll
you
just
know,
be a good, short segment, couple minutes that
what's
we're
your-
producing in real time.
What's your take on it?
Of course, we are in the immediate aftermath still of the Mar-a-Lago execution of the search warrant, and of course, that's a shibboleth.
Don't call it a raid, guys.
Exactly. That's a shibboleth in
Raiders
American
of the
politics.
lost nuclear
If you
dogs?
call it a raid, you're Mr. MAGA J6, and if you call it a search,
Yeah,
you are Nancy Pelosi.
it's so dumb.
So unfortunately, that's the binary that we are in. But regardless, it seems like the raid helped, ironically, Donald Trump more than anyone else.
Yeah.
67% of Republicans said that it improved their opinion of him, while only 3% said it decreased their opinion of him in a poll that you showed me. I don't have the source for that off the top of my head.
It was more like from whatever YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
It was a YouTube
poll. It was a YouTube poll?
Not the most scientific.
Oh, okay, never mind then.
But
fake news, guys.
Of the people that voted on that poll.
But still.
But that's the narrative that everyone's putting out.
But it's really created a rally around the Trump 2024 flag effect.
Yeah.
Because now people feel like Trump's under attack. He's under attack for them. He's standing between them and whatever.
It's just bullshit in the sense that, like, not to litigate the whole raid thing, because I really don't care, honestly. But it's just bullshit because it's like Hillary had fucking email servers in her house and they didn't raid her. Like, the amount of top secret documents that different American officials have possession of, or it's a lot of cap, you know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah,
it's selective application of the law. But back to what you were saying about how it affects the 2024 race. What do you think?
Well, I was getting a real sense that I shouldn't say most Republicans, but certainly your serious mainstream establishment Republicans who might swing a little bit in the never Trump direction, even though they probably voted for Trump twice. Those kinds of people were chomping at the bit to throw Trump off the side of the boat and run DeSantis instead. And honestly, I agree with that, even though, well, anyway, we'll get into that stuff another time. But I feel like now that the Mar-a-Lago raid has happened, it's going to be really hard for Ron DeSantis to run against Donald Trump. And I really do think the Mar-a-Lago raid was a decisive factor there, because I feel like even the Trumpers, even the hardcore MAGA core constituency, were beginning to say, well, you know what, dude's getting old, let's run with Ron.
Yeah.
And that's gone now.
Yeah.
Now it's Trump 2024 1000%.
Yeah. That's the thing. Should we count out DeSantis this quickly, though? Like,
my hot take, honestly, and I've said this in the past, but now after the Mar-a-Lago raid, it definitely feels more likely. I think they're going to broker some deal where DeSantis gets to be VP.
Really?
Because obviously it's not going to be Magic Mike.
Yeah.
So who else is it going to be, right?
But I'm still not convinced that DeSantis even wants the job, honestly.
Oh, he definitely does.
But even
DeSantis was born to be president. That man is a human Tom Clancy novel.
Has he said anything about it? What has he said in his statements? His public
He's
statements?
been very coy. Normally what politicians do, even when they do want to run, is they say, no, I have no aspirations to be leader. Justin Trudeau, I have no aspirations to be leader of the Liberal Party or to be Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau said that. And that was the moment I knew that he was interested in running for... DeSantis isn't even doing that. He's basically being coy and saying, well, right now I'm the governor of Florida, freest state in the country, blah, blah, blah. But he's not, at least not that I've seen, discounting the possibility that he might run for president in 2024. So I think if they can just broker a deal with DeSantis early, have a Trump-DeSantis ticket, you can basically let DeSantis be president and take the frontline role that Kamala Harris was supposed to take with Joe Biden. And, you just kind of keep Trump off the stage for the most part. And then, you let him go to the rallies and say the greatest hits, and you get him to say all the lines about immigration and whatever else.
Where Cheney takes care of foreign and domestic policy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, kind of. That to me seems like the best outcome post Mar-a-Lago.
I don't think he'd ever agree to that shit.
You don't think Trump would take DeSantis?
No, he would take him, but I don't think he'd make him change.
Oh, well, no.
If anything,
I don't mean
he'd use it to Sun.
Not a real Cheney situation, but give DeSantis actual stuff to do and make him a more public face of the administration.
Yeah, because Mike was pretty involved, Magic Mike Pence.
He was. Up until J6, Mike Pence was pretty ride or die.
Yeah.
So
I could see a similar relationship brewing. They have sent some shots at each other, but
that's the other thing too. Why would DeSantis take public shots at Trump if he wasn't running in 2024?
No, that's true. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
yeah, that's a good point.
Trump's got to kind of nip that in the bud with a VP selection, and then everything kind of just runs smoothly, I think.
Because that's the thing, a DeSantis-Trump ticket would be...
How can it lose at this point?
Unless they run Dwayne Johnson or Michelle Obama.
a Rock Michelle ticket would be
That would actually
pretty hard for a lot of Americans to vote against.
Yeah. So anything short of that, if they're thinking of running Joe again, running Pete Buttigieg, or Kamala,
Oh my God.
or some other Democrat dweeb, AOC. We'll go AOC versus Trump DeSantis.
So AOC, I think, is going to be like 35 and 2 months
Yeah.
when this happens, and you have to be 35. No, she gets crushed, man. She gets crushed. You think Joe Manchin voters are voting for AOC? No. You think Kristen Sinema voters are voting for AOC? Hell no.
Cubans in Florida are voting for AOC. Fuck no.
Absolutely not. The Cubans in Florida are literally going to vote for Enrique Tarrio before they vote for AOC.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's the ticket, honestly. That is the dream ticket for them.
So the real winner of the raid was Trump, and the loser, potentially, ironically, Ron DeSantis?
What about the possibility that they aren't bluffing and they actually plan on prosecuting and convicting him?
Like, what if they actually do have all of this evidence that they pretended to have for 7 years? Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, like, I've heard pretty much the case that,
what if, okay, what if the Solomon Islands had a space program, and they were just hushing it up this whole time, but Solomon Islanders have already colonized Mars, man?
Yeah. So you have no belief that they actually intend to jail him so that he doesn't run?
If the Solomon Islands had a space program, we'd know about it.
But they could pull out any sort of bullshit and, like, say, hey, this is a crime. Like,
And just run a kangaroo court just to polarize the country further and cause more civil unrest?
Well, okay, that's the big thing, the civil unrest.
I mean, it's probably good for Democrats, electorally speaking, so you're right. Maybe there is a strategic argument in favor of civil unrest, but
yeah,
that's a lot.
If it's going to happen, maybe. I don't know. Escalation. You know what I mean? Like, with the whole, what we lived through with the illness for 2 years. We kept on saying, oh, they possibly couldn't have done that. When they announced, different camps that they were putting people in, different facilities, they're like, oh no, they would never do that,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
They boiled the frog, guys. The frog has been boiled to death over 2 years. But you guys already know this.
I feel like this is a frog boiling moment, but on your point, I think the one thing you mentioned to me before that is preventing any of that from happening is martyrdom. That's what they
that's exactly what I mean.
They want to boil it up enough so it's hot, but not make a full martyr out of him. Yeah, that's the dangerous scenario.
And that's what went wrong with Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. Is they didn't make it wasn't like a massive martyrdom like MLK or something like that.
Yeah.
But they made him a mini martyr, certainly, by making it look like they were persecuting him as a citizen rather than investigating him in his capacity as an elected official.
It's the reason Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon ultimately, right? Like, they don't want to. They wanted to. They talk a lot of shit, talk a big game, but ultimately, they don't want to go all the way. I guess because it hurts their long-term ambitions. I guess So,
honestly, given what presidents were doing routinely back then, I'd say Nixon deserved the pardon.
Oh, and we could do I want to do a full episode on Nixon, man. Nixon did nothing wrong. I will say this. I would endorse Nixon in the year of our Lord 2022.
So while we're talking about America on our Canadian podcast, let's switch it to a cultural topic.
Yeah.
Namely, the return recently of the all-American blockbuster film.
Oh my goodness.
Because this summer, there are probably other ones too, but the two examples that certainly came to my mind were Elvis and Top Gun. Maverick. Yeah.
I.e. the John McCain story.
Yeah.
Man,
with a happier ending.
Yeah, that's a great transition because,
Is that Top Gun 3, Maverick runs for Senate?
Oh.
Maverick runs for president.
I'd love to see that. But yeah, what's your take on this whole, kind of mini renaissance we have in the world of Marvel movies and Disney remakes and,
Well, even superhero movies were kind of celebrations of America at one point.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And obviously they're not really as much now, but you still have a little bit of, Captain America, Iron Man, military-industrial complex kind of stuff going on. But to have these full-throated, kind of red-blooded, patriotic, but without being explicitly political movies, and sorry, the way I'm making it sound like Elvis is this like super conservative movie or something. It's not. But what's different about it and a little bit radical about it is that it is a traditional great American story. And obviously it deals with social injustice and stuff like that, but it's still this celebration of this story that happened in America. And Top Gun Maverick similarly is a full-throated embrace of what made America great in the first place. And to just see Hollywood go so strongly in that direction after years of the wokening or whatever, right, where everything has to be this critical post-colonial deconstruction of everything.
Even contrasting, like you mentioned, like Christopher Nolan, at one point it's like contrasting The Dark Knight with a movie like Top Gun. Both actiony kind of adventure stories, but The Dark Knight in the post 9/11 kind of context.
The Patriot Act, surveillance state. At what point are people more afraid of terrorists than they are the government, or vice versa? Like, you're right, those movies really wrestled with those issues.
Versus Maverick, which is about, celebrating the military-industrial complex. You know what I mean? The idea that, like, one man with a dream could make it happen, you know what I mean? And kind of lead the team to victory and vanquish our enemies. And I think they're great comparisons, too, because both directors, both productions, namely, like, I forget who the Maverick director was, but basically the director is Tom Cruise.
It wasn't Bruckheimer? Bruckheimer didn't come back for round 2?
I think he might have produced it.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think Bruckheimer directed it. But let's say director Tom Cruise, just for argument's sake.
I mean, basically, yes.
Versus...
it's like head coach Tom Brady, but anyway.
Or head coach LeBron,
General manager LeBron.
Yeah, versus... Christopher Nolan, it's like they both emphasized their practical effects. How they were both a reaction to the over CGI-fication of media up until that point. And they're like, no, we're doing practical events. This is a real lived-in kind of world. These are real planes that we're dealing with. But they took those tools to completely different ends to tell completely different conclusions about what America is. You know what I mean? Like, Nolan still had the hopeful aspect of it, but it was shrouded in just this dark kind of veneer of a civilization in decline, whereas Top Gun is the ultimate kind of hopeful movie. It's like pretty much like Top Gun is the ultimate, like, I guess, post-Bush, Obama, Trump era movie, whereas, like, The Dark Knight is entirely,
it's a Bush movie.
Yeah, entirely like placed in the Bush era, you know what I mean?
In the early Obama era, for sure, yeah.
So, I don't know if any of that makes sense,
No, totally. It absolutely makes sense. And, the movie itself isn't really political. I'd say, obviously, it's like a hawkish movie in the sense that it's, supporting the American military-industrial complex in this kind of abstract way and so on.
Yeah.
But, like, who's the enemy even? Like, North Korea? Like, I literally saw this movie in theaters. And obviously they're fighting, like, I guess, MiGs or J-22s or whatever. Oh, Iran. Yeah, I think it is Iran.
Because they're talking about...
Right, it is Iran. It is 100% Iran. Yeah. Sorry, spoilers.
They don't...
Spoilers.
It's not... Because they don't say it's Iran, but...
No, but I'm about to drop a spoiler. Because the Iranians still had the Tomcats from the Shah, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway. It's okay. It wasn't that bad of a spoiler. It's a movie about planes, guys. The spoilers are not that bad.
And that's the thing. The politics... It wasn't, like, just forced down your throat.
No, it didn't enter into it at all, except in the ways that obviously a military kind of heroic movie has an implicit kind of message
in
about.
Contrast with Captain Marvel, I don't know if you saw that one.
No.
Literally, she's a pilot in the movie, and they have a fight scene that's set to No Doubt's "I'm Just a Girl," da 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 da. You know that song?
No.
It's like No Doubt Gwen Stefani.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think I do know that song.
I'm just a girl, da, da, da. Like literally, it's laid on very heavily,
Right.
Or the Avengers Endgame girl power scene.
How is that not sexist though?
Yeah.
Because if it was like a Wolverine or something, it'd be like heavy metal or something, right? And then because it's a girl, they play this like Gwen Stefani, like I don't know, but anyway.
And it's like you have girls in the Top Gun movie, like at least one.
Yeah.
In the main cast, you have diversity, but it's like that's not the point.
Yeah, you got a
of the
female
movie.
fighter pilot in that movie.
And now I think it's the 6th or 7th highest domestic grossing film in American domestic box office history.
It kind of saved
made
the theater.
over $1 billion. Yeah.
Like, guys, the movie industry was in rough shape.
Yeah. And Tom Cruise held on to it throughout all of COVID. This movie's been sitting in the can for 2 years, and he's like, this is coming out in theaters.
And he had the little speech at the beginning.
Yeah.
He's like, thank you for coming to the theater. And obviously,
class act,
he was a class act. He's a true professional.
Yes.
Say what you will about Tom Cruise, the person,
Scientology,
but as an actor,
yes.
he is a true professional. And I have nothing but respect for his work ethic.
Yeah. And then Elvis, oh my goodness.
Elvis is, there's like, where do you even begin with that one? I've seen that movie twice, and I still, it's still hard to talk about.
Still processing.
Still kind of overwhelming.
Yeah. Because I guess it's the ultimate chronicle of, he really was the first kind of global superstar to come out of America, right? In the modern kind of media age, And it's basically the idea of like, the nature of celebrity. Like at the end, Tom Parker, like another spoiler, but this is like,
Come on, guys, this happened 50 years ago.
Yeah, like basically he says, some people say the drugs killed him, some people say it was me, but Tom Parker, his manager, is saying it was you, the audience, or not you. It was his love for you that killed him. But the idea that like a celebrity at that level gives so much of themselves that they can't take anymore.
They're always on.
Yeah.
They can't not be on,
Yeah. So it's just so beautifully done, and like obviously highlighting his ties to black music. Kind of, they did a good job. Kind of like maybe they laid it on a bit too thick, but I liked how they kind of countered that narrative that Elvis was just this racist who stole black music just because he wanted to make money off of it.
I mean, I'm as repulsed by wokeness as the next person, but I honestly didn't feel like they laid it on too thick. I felt like they laid it on just thick enough to appease the other side.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then they, but it was very tasteful, I thought.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they had the whole Martin Luther King tribute thing,
Okay, well, honestly, the Bobby Kennedy thing, that got a bit much for me. That was actually when I had my little anti-woke gut reaction. Like, really, we're gonna sit here and you jack off Bobby Kennedy? Pardon my turn of phrase
Bobby
there.
Kennedy truther?
I don't like Bobby Kennedy. I'll be honest.
Why not?
I'm not a fan. We'll get into it another time. It's a big topic.
Okay. Damn, Bobby Kennedy catching strays.
I'm not a huge fan of any Kennedys, but I do respect Thug Life when I see it. So, I got it. And, John Kennedy certainly was an icon and an incredible man, even if you don't like him or disagree with him about a lot of things. But anyway, enough about the Kennedys. Let's talk about the king.
And also, like, his contribution to music, which has just been so overlooked until now. Like, I recently checked his, like, Spotify listenership. Let me pull this up.
Oh my god, his numbers must be just fucking unreal right now. I know for a fact
it wasn't that high before, but like I'm on the Elvis subreddit, and so many people, like every single day, they're like, oh, I'm a new fan, I saw the movie, where should I start? You know what I mean? Because when did I get into Elvis? When I was like 12, 13, which is like a decade ago at this point. Like, I felt out of place liking Elvis, because like kids that young at that point, especially black kids, didn't even know who Elvis was, much less like any songs from him. But I'll never forget, I was watching TV with my parents, and like we were watching this like gospel channel or whatever, and this infomercial comes on, and it's like selling like
one of those greatest hits CDs for boomers.
Yeah, and literally they were selling Elvis Presley gospel songs, and I'm like,
oh, cool.
I didn't know Elvis Presley did gospels, and they showed all these clips from his movies and stuff, and him singing these songs, and I'm just like, and just the passion and the soul. And I grew up in church, so like, you could tell when someone's faking it and when it's legit, when they have a real hunger for God, you know what I mean, and just a desire to praise God.
What did you think of the scene where he experiences religious ecstasy in the black church?
That
right after the like erotic sequence in the bar. I thought that was unbelievable storytelling.
It's
by Baz Luhrmann.
100% accurate. Pretty much the church and like kind of like sketchy kind of bluesy dive bars. You know what I mean? Mixed in with some country hillbilly influences. Those are the pillars of American popular music.
Yeah.
The church, the kind of blues, black blues, and white country or hillbilly music. All of American pop music comes out of
basically,
that trinity, you know? So yeah, that was so accurate. And also like the scene in the church itself was the most accurate depiction I've seen of like a black kind of, you know, Pentecostal evangelical kind of, you know, praise and worship, hallelujah, hooting and hollering kind of church that I grew up in. In most movies, like they definitely lay it on too thick in terms of like it's just overly exaggerated, but for some reason the music, the whatever song that they were singing and the sound of it, and just like it was packed, and I felt like I was in church again. Like they got it, bang on, you know. And this is an Australian dude who did that. Can we talk about that? Australians tell better American stories than Americans now.
100%.
Like
100%.
It's sort of like how all of our superheroes are British.
Yeah, well, yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah, our British actors.
Yeah, Henry Cavill.
Yeah, Bale.
Christian Bale's Welsh. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Holland is fucking Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah.
Like stealing all American jobs. Like, yeah, I don't know. Why is it that foreigners have become better at telling American stories?
Because they're not self-hating Americans.
Yeah, they actually love the country and appreciate it.
What percentage of Hollywood would you describe as a self-hating American? Like 90+%?
99%, yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it, is that when you grow up in another country, not Canada so much because we're a little too close for that, but you have this romantic image of America and what it represents, and the frontier, and you know, like for example, in Germany, they love cowboys and Indians.
Yeah, I remember hearing
and they have all these country western stores and stuff, and it's easier to buy a Stetson hat in Germany than it is in Eastern Canada.
Yeah. And all these people who've made it in Hollywood, they've had to grind to even fucking get on the seashores of America, you know what I mean? Like, maybe not the most talented person in the world, but Iggy Azalea, her story is pretty fascinating.
Or look at Schwarzenegger.
You know what I mean?
You know, Schwarzenegger is one of the hardworking men in show business ever.
Yeah.
He could barely speak English for years.
Yeah, that's the thing. So
and he became a freaking governor.
So you appreciate that more versus actors who are nepotism babies or who are born and raised in America. Like they don't appreciate shit because it's
all given to them, or it's what they expect. It's what they're immersed in. America's not a land of opportunity for them. Like, I'll bring this back to Canada Day.
Yeah.
So Canada Day has become very controversial in recent years because people are like, oh, should we celebrate this colonial state, blah, blah, blah. But when I go to Canada Day events in Ottawa, or I'm not even attending them intentionally, but just witnessing them, it's like 80% immigrants.
Yes.
And they're decked out in red. They got flags because they came here for a reason, and they have a sense of patriotism that frankly most old stock first generation, or not the opposite of a first generation Canadian, most old stock Canadians will never have, because they take it all for granted and they don't have a home that had problems or lack of opportunity or whatever that led them to come here in the first place.
And that's the thing, and that's like ultimately I feel like I'm very libertarian, but I do have a nationalistic kind of like bend, particularly because you do have to be grateful. Like I think someone was just telling me over the weekend.
That much is certainly true.
I think it was like one of my friends. Yeah. Basically she was saying like, you know, because she's from like, you know, South Africa, like. And she was like, you know, Canadians can't complain about anything.
Yeah, this is Mel.
Yeah. And like, I was like, damn. Because I complain about a lot of shit. Literally, this whole channel platform that we have is about complaining.
It's basically us complaining, yeah.
But it puts it into perspective that, in the grand scheme of things, like we do have stuff, we can complain because that's freedom. But we got to pause and reflect on the fact that we have the freedom to complain.
That is true.
And we gotta cherish that and understand that, yeah, maybe the people running the country ain't shit, but the foundation itself, there's a lot to fight for.
Yeah.
There's a lot worth fighting for, and you gotta appreciate that and respect it. You know what I mean? Like, that's why
you can't just let it sail quietly into the night.
I don't believe in no kneeling for the national anthem bullshit. You know what I mean? If the national anthem is playing, I will take my hat off. You know what I mean? I'll pay my respects to the people who fought and died. Just simple stuff like that. I'm not saying I defend people's rights to kneel and protest and everything, but, you know, I don't know, man. It can't be.
Well, sometimes protest becomes compulsory, and that's when it gets weird.
Well, yeah, that's
when you have to not, you know, stand for the national anthem, because if you do, you are X, Y, or Z nasty name.
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to force anyone to stand, but for me, I stand because I know what I'm standing for, you know? I'm standing for the idea.
On that note of patriotism, though, I feel like the fact that we do kind of have it easy in this country in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways also we don't, you know. Canada's an excellent country relative to other countries in some categories, and is not so excellent in other ways, but still overall we're lucky. But we're so blessed here. We have so many educated people, we have so many natural resources, and yet we still can't get our act together to do basic shit. It's infuriating. And then we pay ridiculous amounts for everything. The cost of living is ridiculous. Our taxes are really high. And, you know, because we have all of this wealth in terms of human capital and resources, it boggles the mind sometimes.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, you could spend your whole life studying and dissecting that particular issue and still only scratch the surface of it. So, you know, I'm not going to go on a whole hour-long rant here. But I think it goes both ways. On the one hand, Canadians can't complain. On the other hand, we kind of have to complain. Because if we don't, you know, the actual problems that we do have in this country, and that does include a lot of people who do live in poverty.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
the question is, what are you complaining about? Are you complaining
like, there are Canadians who might be offended if I call them Canadians, and if so, I apologize. But there are Canadians who don't have clean water.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's. But anyway.
Yeah.
So as grateful as I am, you know, we got to use our gifts to make things actually work, you know.
Yeah, great power comes great responsibility, you know.
Let's not squander our gifts, you know.
Yeah. Do you want to go into Zelensky?
Yeah, so this is a really delicate topic, and honestly, I don't really want to talk about foreign policy right now, so let's opt out of the whole talking about the war itself thing for the time being. Let's gloss over that. But yeah, have we reached Zelensky fatigue? The same way that we kind of reached COVID fatigue and Delta fatigue and Omicron fatigue and BA.5 fatigue and or superhero fatigue. Yeah, exactly. Zombie fatigue.
Yeah.
I had terrible zombie fatigue for years. I just couldn't stand zombie related stuff because the market was just so saturated with it.
J6 fatigue.
J6 fatigue. Oh my god, dude. Liz Cheney fatigue.
Yeah.
We could go on.
So yeah, Zelensky, because they did the Vogue cover. This is weeks, at least a couple weeks ago at this point. And even before then, I noticed on different forums and stuff, comment sections, people were reaching their breaking point with seeing Zelensky everywhere. It got to the point where it was annoying. Like, they wouldn't let him go to the Oscars, like talk at the Oscars, which was its own story. And then he did talk at the Grammys. And I think he was at like the Euro Brit Awards.
Honestly, I really wanted to hear Zelensky's opinion on the top of adult contemporary recording artists in the United States this year.
Yeah,
it's important.
Who was his pick for best melodic hip hop album? You know,
yeah,
the Travis Scott or Lil Baby. Which one is he? You know, and then the Vogue cover was the icing on the cake, the straw that broke the camel's back, because it's him and his wife posing. We can maybe insert some clips from like the shoot where it's like they're doing her makeup and like, you know, they have lighting and they have like those professional kind of studio lighting and they have that mirror thing that they reflect, you know?
Yeah.
And they have like a perfectly kind of positioned Ukrainian down jet, and they position the soldiers.
The down jet photo. It's a beautiful photo.
They position the soldiers
kind of weird, man,
around her in like a particular way, and it's like, it just looks completely staged, which it was, we know, and they're not hiding the fact that it's staged. But when you do something like that blatantly in 2022, people ask, okay, so if you stage this opulent photo shoot in the middle of a literal war zone, what else is being staged? That's the question that people will naturally ask.
They have been, and again, I don't mean to get in on any one country's case here, because every country does this. Canadians might remember that weird exercise our military did, where they claimed that there was a series of wolf attacks when there wasn't, because they wanted to survey how the population would react. It was this weird story in, I think, Nova Scotia or something.
Oh, damn.
Nobody talks about that, of course. But, every country does this. So I'm not saying we're so great, whatever. But it is true that the Ukraine kind of PR comms department has been going absolutely ham since February.
Yes.
And they've done absolutely everything under the book. There was the whole Ghost of Kiev bullshit.
Oh, from
it
the
still
video game.
boggles my mind that people still to this day think that there was a Ghost of Kiev, and now it's all been retconned to no guys, I never believed in the Ghost of Kiev, but it was this great morale boosting story, man, and in wartime you need morale boosting stories to raise the spirits and hopes of the people, man. You need heroes. Every jet in the air could be the Ghost of Kiev protecting you, man.
I am the Ghost of Kiev, I am Spartacus.
And I get it.
Yeah.
But come on, guys, are we really this stupid? That there was all the footage, from Arma 3. Then there were all the pictures of Zelensky in flak jackets and steel helmets that were actually from a visit to the Donbass region in 2019. But they were being circulated as look at Zelensky on the front lines. There was a story, and I tried for about an hour to find any record of this online, and I'm kicking myself that I did not save it at the time. But there was a widely circulated story that was, even by my recollection, mentioned in, quote, serious mainstream-ish publications that said that Zelensky had killed 2 Russian soldiers with a sniper rifle. This was something that people were sharing as if it were fact. And it's absurd. It would be like Justin Trudeau flying to Afghanistan or something. It's... So I think we have reached a certain degree of Zelensky fatigue, and you're absolutely right that the Vogue photo shoot, I think, became the moment it became acceptable to talk about the Zelensky fatigue. Partially because there's also the kind of the class angle, right?
Yeah.
You're a wealthy actor and you're doing this photo shoot with Annie Leibovitz, and meanwhile the fighting age working class young men in your country are fighting and dying. Shouldn't you be taking the day to blah blah blah? And again, there's a counter argument to that too, which is, the PR and so on is worth it. But obviously the PR is not worth it if voters in Western countries are beginning to figure out, well, we're sending tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine, but we're pretending not to be at war with Russia. What's going on?
Yeah. There's this tweet that someone put out at Leilani Doubting that says, "This sums up the world to me. 2022 vulgarity in a nutshell. The globalist elites versus us. Zelensky prepping for his shoot for Vogue. His wife pampered by top makeup artists. Annie Leibovitz flown in. Wilt's innocent people are dying on his battlefield under his watch."
And send me that tweet so I can try to put it up on the screen.
For sure. And even some from we were watching this clip from ET Canada talking about
the mosquitoes are getting us, by the way.
Yeah.
That's why we're swatting.
And even the ET Canada host, I don't know her name, but she was the timing was off.
Yeah, both ET Canada hosts were saying that the timing was off.
Maybe wait until
So for Entertainment Tonight to turn against Zelensky in this way is unbelievable.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's you think, does he want to fight for his country or does he want to be a celebrity? Pick one. But you shouldn't be able to do both.
He definitely wants to be a celebrity. I will say that. We know that for a fact.
Yeah. I guess he was a celebrity, but he wants to be a global, I don't know.
Yeah.
He wants his Netflix deal like the Obamas after this is all said and done.
Well, either he'll have a Netflix deal or he'll be a professor at Columbia or something and live in a beautiful condo in Manhattan. I don't know. There's a few ways this could go. Yeah, you're probably right.
He'll probably get some production company or something, but I don't know, man. It's just, why are we sending these people hundreds of millions of dollars? You know what I mean? That's the question I'm asked. I know why, but it makes you question things, I guess, ultimately. But
Yeah, well, when you see how some of the money is being spent a bit recklessly, it kind of makes you go, well, is this really the best use of resources?
So what do you think? Do you think this will continue a downward spiral of like PR?
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to have as much support for Ukraine in the sense that, and I want to be very specific here, so I don't mince words. Our lighting is dying on us, so we'll wrap up soon. But Canadians are still overwhelmingly supportive of Ukraine, and a big part of that is that 1.3 million Ukrainians, or there are 1.3 million or thereabouts Ukrainian Canadians, including our Deputy Prime Minister / de facto Prime Minister. Oh, nice. Better? Get some lighting, yeah.
Scary movie lights.
Scary movie. So anyway, yeah, there's a ton of Ukrainians in our country, and we're a fairly like progressive media country, and obviously that stuff's all been saturated with Ukraine stuff since late February. However, I don't think that we're ever going to reach the same level of public support as they had from, we'll say, February through like June. I think now people are beginning to ask, where's all our money going? Where are all our weapons going? Are they actually making it to the front line, or are they being, siphoned around by middlemen?
Yeah.
And is the Zelensky administration doing everything they can for peace or for whatever, or are they using their personal leverage to kind of milk the whole situation?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything here, and I want to be totally clear about that. All I'm saying is that Canadians, like Peter, are beginning to ask these questions, whereas 3 months ago you would have been called like a Kremlin toady repeating Russian disinformation if you mentioned like any of this stuff.
I just don't get how we're pro-war all of a sudden, after literally we've had 2 presidents elected in America who were elected
explicitly because they were anti-war. Obama and Trump.
Yeah, so make it make sense is pretty much the moral of the story here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Make it make fucking sense. Is there anything else you wanted to wrap it up?
There's always more, but I think we hit most of the obligatory topics.
It would be nice to end with, man, the movie topic would have been so nice to end with. As like a positive kind of, but honestly that's fine, because the only other thing I have on here is manosphere, racism versus sexism. I guess we could go forever on
save that one for another time.
Yeah, I guess that's it. I guess, did you want to explain a bit about what you want to do with the pennant before we...
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So right now we've been working on a web platform. We've been mostly writing articles, kind of somewhere between short form and long form. We have some long form stuff, we have some short form stuff. Right now most of our content is about Canadian politics, which is unfortunate, but it's because I have a lot to say and to write about and to research about with Canadian politics, and I find it hard to stay disciplined to force myself onto other topics that might be more interesting or relevant or important, frankly. So really we're about everything. We're about arts and culture, socio-political commentary, meta-politics, and we try to stay away from the punditry, even if we have the kind of pundity kind of articles, but I'd say we're still like very open about where we stand on a lot of stuff. We just don't necessarily always make that the priority. I'm word vomiting right now, I'm sorry. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Oh no, I just want this to be, I don't know, somewhere for mushy middle people or anyone really to kind of express themselves, and I just hate like the overly partisanship.
It's so oppressive. Like, okay, you know what? I'll say a lot of what is currently on the site might be considered kind of, center right leaning.
Yeah.
If you are a freaking Trotskyite, okay, and you want to write a response to one of our pieces, you want to call us evil and then explain why and have all these references, I'm happy to publish you. I'm happy to engage with you, to engage in debate, break bread, find common ground, whatever. We stand where we stand, but we're here to learn and engage, not to just confront. and be aggressive and take cheap shots.
Yes.
Sometimes I've been accused of being a little bit too charitable, and maybe not swinging the hatchet as much as I should, but that, it's important to me that mutual respect and that space for serious dialogue and communication. And, civility is good, but, even if it gets a little bit rough in there, we can take it.
Oh, for sure. That's what we want ultimately, is debate, and we want people to think. And also, like, I was kind of tired of, like, the kind of day-to-day kind of clickbait, culture war kind of news stories that admittedly a lot of, like, obviously left-wing, but also right-wing outlets, kind of engage in, where it's like
drag queen story hour of the week.
How many 50 different outlets all talking about the same shit. And it's like, we want to bring something different, especially in the Canadian kind of political kind of space, where it's like there's different stories that maybe happened 15, 20, 50 years ago that you didn't know about, that we could go into and discuss, particularly on YouTube. Like, there's a lot of deep dive subjects that you have, where if it happened in America, there's 100 videos on it, but Canada, there's a big gaping hole, particularly with our media,
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying in the first, about Lisa LaFlamme. And we just have that monopolistic media culture in Canada, where if it wasn't done in Canada people's history, nobody probably did it, Anyway.
So, I guess, stay tuned. There'll be a lot more stuff, and I'm happy to kind of be a part of this, I guess,
Oh, thank you so much for being a part of it alongside me. And we look forward to bringing you guys more content, and to engage with any comments, questions, concerns, etc. that you guys may have. So please check us out on pennant.ink, pennant.ink, and we'll hear from you guys later.
Like and subscribe.
Like, subscribe, retweet, tumble, bumble. I don't know. Whatever it is y'all do.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace out.